Editing is one of the most important parts of photography as an art form, but I feel like there's a bunch of hidden steps that don't really get talked about as much as how to, use every tool in your editing software. Even on this channel, I have a bunch of editing tutorials for individual photos, but I never talked about my entire editing process and all of the steps involved, because all of these steps are just as important as knowing how to use the tone curve, for example. So in this video, we're gonna go over my entire end-to-end Lightroom editing workflow, all the way from taking the photo to coming up with inspiration to arriving at the final result. And again, it's going to be more about my editing philosophy, my process, and not about any single individual edit. If you're looking for those, check out my other editing tutorials on this channel. Even before the editing process starts, one thing you can do to maximize your creative potential is to always shoot with the edit in mind. I call this shooting for the edit. So for example, in street photography, instead of looking at the world as it is, I try to imagine the world how it would look like after I've already applied my edits. And I like to optimize my settings and my raw files in a way that is the easiest to edit instead of trying to make the file look perfect in camera. So for night photography, just as an example, this might often mean shooting a little bit underexposed, trying to preserve the highlights. After I return from a shoot, now comes the time to import and select the photos that I want to edit for later. And I do this by rating the photos that I want to select 1 star, and the photos that I don't want to select, I don't delete them, but I just leave them unrated. Then I go and sort by rated, after which I also sync all of the selected photos into my Adobe Cloud so that I can access them on all of my devices. Step 3. Once I've imported all the photos, we're gonna go through the initial round of edits. Now personally, I do not like editing my photos on the computer. What I like to do instead is sit down in a comfortable chair, open up a podcast, and start going through the initial phase of editing. I think a lot of people would use presets here, but I don't use presets for this purpose. I like to start every edit from scratch, more about presets later. And I just do the initial round of edits, knowing full well that I'm probably gonna come back to most of these photos and re-edit them later on. And the reason I do this is because usually the initial round of edits is just not gonna be good no matter what, because the photos are still fresh on my mind. And I find when the photos are too fresh, I find it difficult to rate the photos more objectively. No matter how much I want to share a photo that I just took, how much I want to post it on Twitter or Instagram, over the years I've just learned that I'll regret it like 80% of the time. So this is my rule that I have to follow if I want to take this seriously. Either way, I start editing each photo by thinking about why I took the photo, what made me press the shutter, and then I try to simply exaggerate some of the key details that I liked about the photo when I was taking it. And I also do things like cropping, fixing the exposure, and often create a couple of different versions with a couple of different color schemes that I can come back to and pick the better direction later, and generally just experiment a little bit. Now sometimes when I'm totally stuck on an edit, this time is when I might do things like try a couple of different presets to try to find an unexpected direction to go with the photo, or simply just play with random sliders that I don't usually touch too much and see what happens. Now I used to start my edits with a preset, but I don't anymore simply because I don't want to put my edit into a predetermined box. I want to start from scratch, and that's why the presets that I use nowadays, my own presets, are more exaggerated in nature, because I use them more simply to give me some ideas when I'm stuck on an edit. And often after applying them, I might actually even tune them down. By the way, I do have my old preset pack on my website. Might be time for an update soon as well. Check out timusphoto.com or the description for more details on those. And now the second round of edits, I take this a little bit more seriously than the first round. So usually, ideally, I don't listen to podcasts. I actually just put on music that is similar to the style of photos that I'm trying to edit. So usually that is like vaporware and lo-fi music. I make sure that the light in my room is correct, meaning no massive sunlight. Usually I edit at night, not in too much darkness, but not in too much light either, in maximum screen brightness. And definitely don't use anything like a blue light filter when you're editing. The coloring is just gonna be way off. And this round of edits crucially has to be at least 1 day after I finished the first round of edits. Sometimes it's even 2-3 weeks or months after. It just depends if I'm stuck or not. At this point of the edit, I fine-tuned the image by doing things like even localized spot edits and cloning out distracting details, and just really try to focus on the photos with no distractions. Some photos are going to be ready after this round, others might take even a couple more similar rounds after another break. But I've done it many times where I've rushed the process, where I've tweeted a photo out or released it on Instagram or whatever too soon, and then I wake up a couple days later and I see that I could have easily worked the edit even more, and I always regret it because I think the difference between the good photographers and the great photographers is that the great photographers just have more patience and they have a higher standard for what they expect from themselves. So I believe, this is just my opinion, that it's actually less to do with talent than you would expect, and it's just the internal quality filter and the patience that separates the good from the great. So that's my observation, and that's just the logic that I try to follow, because I definitely do catch myself being a little bit too eager and not putting enough work in, and I always end up regretting it. And that's just my observation. I think it's one of those things that is difficult to understand because you never really see the hidden amount of work people put into getting great at something. Especially in photography, you only see the end results. And now one more thing we can learn from the great artists before us, especially when we're lacking inspiration, is to feed our creative souls with some source material before we start the editing process. This can be things like looking at great photographers' photo books, watching movies before you start editing, or even just looking at other photographers' work on social media to gain a little bit of inspiration before you start editing, or give you ideas when you're stuck. Now, of course, we gotta do this ethically and intelligently. We can't just copy everything, but we can take a little elements from someone and learn and be inspired. And like I said, the music helps, the room you're in helps, the mental state you're in helps. Some of my best editing work has come as a result of just listening to great music, hanging out by myself when it's raining outside, editing at like 4 a.m. when I can't sleep. Anyway, now that I've told you my general Lightroom workflow, you might be more curious about some exact editing steps that I've taken to achieve some of the results behind some of my pictures. And in that case, you might also want to check out some of these editing tutorials that I have on my channel. Or perhaps you'd even like to see me out taking these photos. I also do vlogs. Thanks for watching, bye.